Hey everyone, we're going to talk about matrix multiplication today. So hopefully you remember the basics of a matrix and how they're set up, because it's going to be vital in order to multiply matrices today. So what you do want to remember from the last section is how a matrix is set up. Remember that it's all made up of rows and columns. So if I give you a matrix that maybe looks like this, your number of rows would be here and your number of columns would be here. Okay, so row and row. So this would be a 2 by 2 matrix. Well, the rows and columns are going to be extremely important for multiplying, okay, because order is going to matter in making sure things match up. So if I'm going to ask you to multiply matrices, so for example, remember we use capital letters for matrices. So if I want you to take matrix A times matrix B, alright, so we're going to say that matrix A has dimensions m by n, okay, and m and n are just any numbers, so the rows and the columns, and matrix B is an n by p, okay, so an n by p. What you would notice is that in order to have these multiplied, the middle numbers, so here we've got two n's in the middle, those have to be equal, alright, and then if those are equal, that means we can multiply them together, alright. And the new dimensions of our matrix that we're going to get for our answer is going to be the dimensions of the outside numbers. So this is our new size, our new dimensions. All right, and that would get us matrix AB. So in order to multiply any matrices together, and this is important for the rest of this chapter, the middle numbers have to match when you set them side by side. So let's look at a basic example without even multiplying. Okay. Example 1. So if I give you a matrix that is a 4 by 3 and a 3 by 2, alright, well, always make sure and see if the middles match up. So here, 3 and 3 are the same. That's good. So that means our new dimensions are going to be a 4 by 2. Okay, so the new matrix is going to be a 4 by 2 matrix. And this is going to be really helpful when we do actually multiply, so you know how big your matrix is supposed to be. That way you can fill it in correctly and you know you've got the right size. Alright, what about example 2? If I give you a 3 by 4 and a 3 by 3, well, what you should notice is that the middle two numbers do not match up. Alright, so that's a problem, so you cannot multiply. Alright, and that's all you'd have to write. Cannot multiply, does not exist, however you want to write that. If those don't match up in the middle, you can't do anything, so you have to leave it as is. Alright? So now let's get into the actual multiplying part. To multiply, and if you think this is going to help you to write this, that's fine. Otherwise, if you think it's going to be easier to just jump into an example, that's fine as well. To multiply, you're going to take the elements, remember the elements are just individual numbers in your matrix, in each column, or sorry, in each row, and you're going to combine them, and I'll explain what I mean by combine, with the corresponding element in a column. Okay. Whoops. Let me get this out of the way. There we go. So the corresponding element in a column. So let's go ahead and just start with a really basic example. So we'll call this example 3. So I'm going to ask you to find matrix AB. So if they're side by side like that, that usually means multiplication. If matrix A is this matrix, it's 1, 4, 3, negative 2. And if matrix B is equal to 5, negative 7, 9, 6. Okay, and this is all going to be about keeping things organized with your work. So you're going to do some multiplying and you're going to do some adding. So first off, you need to make sure that you can multiply these together. So check your sizes and check your dimensions of your matrix. So right here, this is a 2 by 2, okay, and this one is also a 2 by 2 because the middles match up. We know this can be multiplied. And what's our final dimension going to be? It's going to be a 2 by 2 matrix because that's what the outside numbers are. Alright, so we know in the end we're going to have a 2 by 2 matrix. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start dealing with each row and each column. And I'm going to do this by highlighting some to hopefully help you guys see. So what we're going to do is we're always going to start with the first row of the first matrix. Alright, so we're going to start in row 1 of matrix A and column 1 of matrix B. Okay, so notice row, then column. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the corresponding parts. So the first number in the matrix A with the first number in matrix B. Okay? And that's going to be 1 times 5. All right. Then you have to go to the second part of that row with the second part of that column. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these together. So 4 times 9. So this is going to be our first spot of our 2 by 2 matrix. Okay? And when we simplify that, we get 5, and 4 times 9, that's 36. Okay, so 36 plus 5, that gets us 41. So there's our first number in our matrix. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing, but for the next row in the next column. For the first row in the second column. So when you do this, you're always going to do one row, then all the columns before you ever move on to the next row. Okay, so now we're going to do row 1, column 2. And we're going to do the same thing. So first element with the first element in our second row. So we'd have 1 times -7 plus second element of that row plus the second element of that column. So 4 times 6. And when we simplify that, we get -7 plus 24. Okay? And when we simplify that, we're basically taking 24 minus 7, so we get 17. Okay? Now we've done all of our columns in B, so now we have to move on to the second row in the first one. So go back to our highlighter. So I'll do this in blue. So row 2, and now column 1. Okay. So row 2, we're going to take first element and first element. So 3 times 5, okay, then plus, it's always a plus, our -2, that's our second element, with the 9, that's our second element. So -2 times 9. 3 times 5, that's 15. -2 times 9, that's -18. So 15 plus -18 gets you -3. Okay? And then last but not least, that second column, okay, second row with second column. Wow, and I realize you can't even see that. Okay, so with this right here. So we would have, in this case, 3, that's our first element, with -7, that's the first element in that row, plus, let's see, that was -2, and then +6. Okay, so first and first, second and second. So we get -21 plus -12, and when we combine two negatives, it's still a negative, and we get 33. All right, now I know that's kind of messy to work with, and as you learn to do this, you'll find a way to make it easier. A lot of you will probably end up doing a little bit of mental math, but when we simplify all of that, we get 41, 17, -3, -33. So there is our 2 by 2 matrix, 2 rows, 2 columns, and that would be our final answer. So let's go ahead and try another one. So this one, I'm assuming that A is equal to this matrix, -3, 3, 1, -2, and B is equal to 1, 5, -3, -2 here. And I want you to find a B. So I want you to go ahead and try this matrix on your own and see how you do. If you have any questions as you're working through it, just pause the video, come ask me really quickly. Otherwise, you can check your answer here in a second after you've tried it on your own. Alright, so I went ahead and worked this one all out for you. If you can't see something or you have a question about where I got a number, feel free to let me know. But remember, we do first row, first column, okay? Then first row, second column. So you do first row with all the columns, then second row with all the columns. And so I went ahead and filled everything in here, and you should end up with -12, -12, 7, 9. Right? That should be -21. Wrote that backwards. Okay, so -12, -21, 7, 9. If you didn't get that, feel free to ask me for help, but really it's just multiplying and adding, and the key is making sure that you've got the right things combined in the right spots. All right, so you can do this with more than just 2 by 2 matrices. So what I want to go through with our last example is one that's a little bit more complex. So this one deals with actually 3 different matrices. So we have an A matrix that is -1, 2, -3, 0, 4, 1. Okay, so this is a 3 by 2 matrix, and I'm just going to write that underneath. Then I have that B is a 2 by 2, and it's 3, 2, negative 2, negative 1. Okay, so here's a 2 by 2. And then lastly, C is another 2 by 2, so negative 4, 5, 1, 0. All right, so there's our three matrices, and what I want to find in this one is A times B minus C. So this is going to require you to understand how to add or subtract matrices as well from the first section, as well as our new multiplication. So just like if you were going to add, subtract, multiply, divide, whatever, in PEMDAS, it's the same thing. Do parentheses first. So here it asks us to subtract B minus C. So matrix B minus matrix C. So we're going to do that first. Okay, so B minus C would look like this. So matrix B minus matrix C. And remember when you, oops, that's a plus 5. Remember when you are adding or subtracting, you just add or subtract the corresponding parts. So 3 minus negative 4, that's going to get us a positive 7. 2 minus 5 gets us negative 3. Negative 2 minus 1 is going to get us negative 3. Negative 1 minus 0 is just negative 1. Okay, so this is our B minus C part. So this is what takes care of the inside parentheses. And that's still a 2 by 2 matrix. And now what they want us to do is take A times this new matrix that we just came up with. So first off, make sure that it's the right dimensions to multiply. So can a 3 by 2 be multiplied by a 2 by 2? Yes, it can, because these match. So our new dimensions are going to be a 3 by 2. So it's going to be the same size as matrix A, and that's important to make sure you have it in the right size when you're finished. So let's go ahead and I'm going to scroll this down. Okay, so A times that B minus C is going to look like this. Matrix A, make sure you write matrix A first. Negative 1, 2, negative 3, 0, 4, 1. Okay, times our green matrix that I just wrote. Okay, so 7, negative 3, negative 3, negative 1. And now we can go ahead and start multiplying. So we're going to start with our first row, first column. So first row, first column. So that's going to get us, let's see, equals, let me extend the page. Negative 1 times 7 plus 2 times negative 3. So remember, first and first, second and second. Okay? And that gets us negative 7 plus negative 6, okay, which is negative 13. Okay, so that takes care of the first. And then first row, second column. So that gets us negative 1 times negative 3 plus 2 times negative 1. Okay, when we simplify, we get 3 and negative 2, which gets us a positive 1 for that element. And now we've done all the columns, so we move to the second row. So second row, first column. Okay, I'm going to do that in another color. So we get negative 3 times 7, and then plus 0 times negative 3. And that gets us negative 21 plus 0, which is just negative 21. And this might take you some space, so just make sure you prepare yourself to get some room. And then for second row, second column, we get negative 3 times negative 3 plus 0 times negative 1. So we get positive 9 plus 0, which is just 9. Okay. All the columns are done, so finally we go to third row, first column. Okay. So third row, first column, that's going to be 4 times 7 plus 1 times negative 3. So 28 plus negative 3, that gets us 25. And then last but not least, third row, second column. So we get 4 times negative 3 plus 1 times negative 1. So negative 12 plus negative 1 is negative 13. Now I know I took up a lot of space with that. Hopefully you guys will figure out a method that you prefer so that you can understand what you're writing, but you've got to be organized overall with your work. Okay, so our final answer for A times B minus C is going to be the 3 by 2 matrix, negative 13, 1, negative 21, 9, 25, negative 13. So 3 by 3 rows, 2 columns, looks like we're good to go. Alright, if you have any questions about how to multiply, what numbers go where, the order that I plug them in, please make sure that you are asking me. This is going to be a really important section that builds for the rest of the chapter, and this is a really important section that if you get help now, it's going to make it a lot easier later. Alright, so that's all for this section. Thanks for listening.